Do you think the Quran is an everlasting miracle? Are you a Muslim and don't know anything about the categories of the Quran's miraculousness? Have you just heard people say the Quran is a miracle and believed whatever they told you? On our channel, we listen to the perspectives of religions without any religious bias. Today, we want to examine together the miraculous nature of the Quran, specifically its numerical and mathematical miracles, one by one, and see what their topics and discussions are really about, and how people claim these are miracles. In the previous video, we went through 11 of the scientific miracles of the Quran one by one together. The miracles of the Quran are divided into 4 categories, and we already examined its scientific miracles. As for the prophetic miracles, in my opinion, they can't really be examined because their evidence and documentation are actually the Quranic sources themselves, and that can't prove the Quran for us. The next category of miracles are the literal miracles of the Quran, and the final category in the classification of Quranic miracles are its numerical miracles. Stay with us as we examine each of these numerical miracles together. The first miracle we want to look at is one that Islamic scholars claim. There are 365 days in a year, and the word day is used 365 times in the Quran. However, in their count, they only included the word Yawm, day. But we also have al-Ayyam, Yaman, and various other forms that express the root word Yawm. However, they only counted the word Yawm itself and did not include its derivatives, and that's how they arrived at the number 365 days. Another claim made by Islamic scholars is that in the world we live in, the ratio of water to land is 70 to 30, and this ratio is also reflected in the words of the Quran. That is, the word sea is mentioned 32 times and the word land is mentioned 13 times. However, when counting, you need to pay attention to many details. For example, there are several words in Arabic like bar, arz, and others that mean sea and land. But Islamic scholars only considered the words bahar and bar, which means sea and land, and set these two against each other. And even in counting these two, they did not follow the previous counting rule that was used for Yawm. When counting Yawm, they only counted the singular forms of the word that meant day. But here, for bar and bar, which means sea and land, they combined both the singular and plural forms, and that's how they arrived at the count of 70 to 30 using this method. The next numerical and mathematical miracle of the Quran is that a number of opposing words that are equal in meaning are mentioned an equal number of times in the Quran. For example, man and woman, life and death, angel and devil, and a few others that we're going to examine together. The first one is man and woman. In fact, in this counting method, only the singular words for man and the singular words for woman are counted. Plurals and derivatives are not included. According to this method, the number of times man and woman appear is 24 each. The next pair of words is life and death, which Islamic scholars say are mentioned an equal number of times in the Quran. But critics here say that in your counting method for life and death, you counted all the roots of life and death. Why did you use the singular form in your previous counting methods, but then change your counting method here? In fact, what they're saying here is that their counting method includes all the singular, plural, and derived forms of life and death together, and that's how they ended up with equal numbers. The next pair of words is faith and disbelief. In fact, in the counting method for faith and disbelief as well, all the roots and derivatives of faith and disbelief have been counted, not just the specific words themselves. And according to this counting rule, the two pairs of words, faith and disbelief, were equal in number in the Quran. The next pair of words worth discussing are angels and Satan. In fact, in the Quran, all the words derived from angels and Satan have been counted together, and they show an equal number. But critics here say that only the singular form of the word itself hasn't been counted. Rather, all the words, forms, derivatives, and attributes of these have been collected, compared, and found to be equal in number. The next pair of words is this world and the hereafter. In fact, the only pair of words that contains no ambiguity is this one, where all the words for this world and the hereafter have been counted together, and they have an equal number. In this counting method, no derivatives, roots, prepositions, adjectives, dependencies, or any extra words have been mixed in. Well, the obvious criticism of this type of counting method is that critics say we should establish a counting method beforehand and then examine all the words according to that method. And if these are divine miracles, well, God wouldn't use contradictions excessively in one place, count them together in another, use derivatives in one case and adjectives, meanings and interpretations in another. Each of these considerations has a different counting rule, and if there were a single rule, then it could actually be called a numerical miracle. But this way it's open to debate. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not saying it's possible either. I've left this discussion open for you. Be sure to share your opinion in the comments section. Another numerical miracle of the Quran that Islamic scholars mention is that verse 143 out of the 286 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, which is exactly the middle verse, uses the word middle. Here critics step in and say that in many different books the word middle or center can sometimes be found used in the middle, and this alone cannot be considered as proof of the text being divine. What do you think? Could this be evidence of the Quran being a miracle? Have you ever heard of the Quran's miracle of the number 19? The first person to mention this number was Rashad Khalifa, an Egyptian scientist living in the United States, who said that all the verses and all the words of the Quran have a remarkable connection to the number 19. He attributes patterns, verses, numbers, and many other things to the number 19, and says that if you take the root of this verse, it becomes 19. If you raise that count to a power, it becomes 19. He brings up issues like this. But the problem with his work is that he says the Bismillah at the beginning of Surah Tawbah was removed by God's command so that his pattern would fit. He also claimed that the last two verses of Surah Tawbah were added by humans and in fact should not be in the Quran. In order for his pattern to work, he also removed two verses from the Quran, which led many Muslims to see him as a villain and a traitor, and in the end, he was assassinated in his own mosque. And his idea was inspired by verse 30 of Surah 74, which says that the guardians of hell are 19. After reading this verse, it led him to create such a pattern and for such an idea to even occur to him. I have previously explained the scientific miracles of the Quran in detail, and on my channel, I discuss religious topics without any bias, without any fear, and with scientific research, reason, and credible evidence that you might not hear elsewhere. In your opinion, can these numerical miracles of the Quran truly be considered miracles or not? If they are not miracles, for those of you who are Muslim, what do you consider to be a miracle? And if you don't consider it a miracle, share your opinions in the comments section so that the community can benefit from them as well. If you've watched this video up to this point, be sure to like it and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our future religious research. Until the next video, goodbye.